What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kevin Moore Show. Now, if you want to stay up to date with all my latest videos, just click that subscribe button below, as this really helps to support the show. If you're new to the show, I interview guests from a spiritual perspective, covering mainstream and alternative subjects. Now, on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Rabbi Wayne Dossick. Now, Rabbi Wayne has just published his 10th book, Radical Loving, One God, One World, One People. His book has been called a compelling appraisal of the state of our present-day world and a bold, visionary, spirit-filled blueprint for its transformation and evolution through radical loving and awesome holiness. Rabbi Wayne Dossick, thank you for joining us.
Great pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Rabbi Wayne Dossick, you've done a number of books over the years, and I believe this is your 10th book. So what other books have you written?
I've done a number of books over the years. The major book is called Living Judaism, The Complete Guide to Jewish Belief, Tradition, and Practice. That book is more than 25 years old, and it's a basic 101 introduction used in synagogues and churches and universities. I've written a number of parenting books, business ethics books, and a number of books in Judaism and various aspects of Jewish theology.
Obviously, I know zippo about most religions, especially Jewish theology or Jewish religion. I was pretty much brought up, with no faith, but except that my own understanding was, we're more than our body and life continues. And as I've done this show for many years, I still feel that, we are more than our body, but what this really is and what this all means, the more I do this show, the more I say to myself, maybe we're not supposed to completely know, but we're all sprinkling some ideas of understanding, but it's not the whole thing. It's not everything.
Well, the soul is eternal. So whether we're on this side or the other side, we are all God's children, and we are all, right now, we're housed in a body. Our eternal soul is housed in a body. And some religions and faith communities believe this is our only time around. And others believe that there is what some call reincarnation, what Judaism calls Gilgul HaNefesh, the rolling of the souls. So a belief of the theology of what happens to us after we die and how we exist forever is part of life. But the issue is, for us right now, how we behave when we're in this body, in this life.
Okay, so what is the main ideas of this book then?
Well, the radical loving is an approach to life. I took one look around at how things were going in our world, and I saw racism and sexism and misogyny and white supremacy and nationalism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. And I saw and heard the divisive rhetoric that was being spewed here in America for a 4-year term and the campaign before that. And I said that we have to do better. We have to learn to live together lest we perish together. And so radical loving is an approach to how we are to live and how we are to get along with each other, which is in love and in holiness.
Well, there's a lot of us that are not even able to do that to ourselves.
We start with loving yourself, man.
Yeah, but isn't that a journey that people are on for decades of their life?
It's a continual journey. It's a continual journey. You're good today, you're not so good tomorrow, and you try to be better the next day.
Just remind me again, what is this premise? Just do it real quick. You said it there real quick. The premise is to learn to love each other. Is that what we're saying? To be kind to each other. Right, okay.
Right.
So how does the book approach that then? How has it taken us through those steps of achieving something like that or trying to show us a way to do that? How do you do that in the book?
Well, it tells us that we are all children of the one God. And there is a God who loves us all, who created us all, who doesn't play favorites, who doesn't say, I like this group better than I like that group. And it teaches us that we get along when we know each other, when we care about each other, when we are compassionate with each other, when we love each other. And so the differences amongst us or between us, some of them are very beautiful because there's not one pathway to and from God. There's not one way that we are to live life, but there is the need for oneness consciousness, that we are all one, that we are all part of one human family, and that God says to us, I hope I love you, and I hope you will love me, and I hope you will learn to love each other. And then throughout the book, I give all kinds of examples of how we're to do that.
With the faith that you're coming from, is it normal practice to sort of step outside and do a book like this?
Well, I am passionately Jewish. I've spent a lifetime being Jewish and teaching Judaism and being somewhat of a leader within the Jewish community. And at the same time, I recognize that any religion's triumphalism or claims to superiority is what breaks us apart. The theme song of the world seems to be right now, my God's better than your God. And if you don't believe so, I'll try to convince you. And if I can't convince you, I will try to terrorize you. And if you won't respond to my terrorism, I'll kill you. And that's what's been going on in the world. And it's so, so painful. And so we are, knowing that we are all children of the one God, we join together in the same approach to creating a world of oneness consciousness. Now, oneness is not sameness. We all have different approaches, and we all have different ways of coming to God. I taught for 17 years at the University of San Diego, which is a private Catholic liberal arts diocesan university here. And I taught the only courses in Jewish studies there. And one of my closest and deepest friends is a Jesuit priest. He doesn't want me to be Catholic, and I don't want him to be Jewish. We respect and honor each other's beliefs, and yet we understand that there's far more that connects us as children of God, that unites us as children of God, than divides us. And so I was invited to preach from the pulpit of the Immaculata. Almost unbelievable, because I was a kid on the south side of Chicago growing up, where I was beaten up by the kids who went to parochial school, Catholic school, who had learned from their priests and nuns that I, Wayne Dosick, had personally killed their Lord. And then in high school, a girl ran up to me in the halls and said, Wayne, I forgive you. I forgive you. And I said to her, Bonnie, what is it? What are you forgiving me? She said, I'm forgiving you for killing Christ. I said, what are you talking about? That was 2,000 years ago. I wasn't there. I didn't know him. As far as I know, he's a nice Jewish boy who made good. And the Jews never killed him. It was the Romans. No. I heard on the radio that the Pope said we could forgive the Jews for killing Christ. Now, that was, of course, Vatican II and Pope John the 23rd. And then push forward, and here I am, a rabbi on a faculty of a Catholic university. We've made tremendous strides because we understand oneness consciousness, because we understand that we are all children of the one God. We respect and honor each other's differences, and we find more that unites us than divides us.
So if we were coming from that space more of seeing each other, that we're all connected in some way, then what you're saying that the world would change in a very quick time, basically, that we would maybe become more peaceful to ourselves and others.
Well, one of the concepts of radical loving is to consider the life of another as precious to you as your own. So look, here's how it goes. We're all created in the image of God, not the physical image, of course, but the spiritual image of God. And therefore, if I look into the mirror, I see my physical face, but I see the spiritual image of God. And if I look into your face, I see the spiritual image of God. And hopefully, if you look into my face, you see the spiritual image of God. And when we see the face of God, the only possible response is love. Because God is love. The world is love. And God teaches us to love. And so when we make the life of another as precious to us as our own, because we are each created in the image of God, then I can't treat you poorly or unhappily or nastily, because how could I do that to God?
And what is God to you then? Would you say? How could you even put that in human words?
Well, God is a creator and the guider, the ultimate redeemer, and God gave us a code of ethics by which to live. That's the brilliance of a religious approach to life. And that is that, for example, science is brilliant, but it is morally neutral. It's nothing good or bad. It just is. And science discovers what is already out there, what was put out there by God. And today's discovery may be brilliant, but waiting around the corner is tomorrow's new discovery. Science doesn't make a value judgment. Science just is. Whereas in a religious approach to life, we have been given this code of ethics, this code of values, a standard of behavior by which to live. And God says to us, if you live this way, I created you and I know you and I know what will be best for you. And if you live this way, you will live together in harmony and tranquility. And if you don't, there are consequences. And the consequences we are seeing right now. So God, to summarize what I just said, God is the creator, God is the guider, and God is the ultimate redeemer. And God gave us this code of ethics by which to live, which enhances and lifts up and elevates the human spirit.
Yeah. And the words that we give for these things like God and the spirit and, life beyond this and, whatever it may be, but those type of names, would you be surprised that when you do pass on, that the actual nature of what this reality was and what you thought was God and all the understandings you thought you had were absolutely not quite the way that we thought they were. They were beyond our understanding, so we couldn't give it words, but they were way beyond what we personify as what we thought it was.
Well, that's most likely true. I'll let you know when I get there.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think once you get there, you could look back and think, that was all I was able to understand of what this was, because it was so far beyond what I thought it was and what could ever
Of
conceive
course,
it was, that
of course.
they were just human words made up by human people in the past and human religions, that actually we could never, we were never meant to know just how vast this was, and that we put so many limitations on it that it was just way beyond.
Well, yes, and it's not as if we just completely made it up. It's that we've gotten downloads or revelations throughout history. So, what we call the pagan world, where the world began to record its own history because it could, some 6,000 years ago. I mean, we know the world is billions of years old, but we have the first recordings of our ability to live in this world some 6,000 years ago. And the pagan world understood certain things. And then human consciousness grew, and the ancient Hebrews received a new revelation. And it wasn't better, it was just a continuation. And Christianity came along and received another revelation because human consciousness had grown again. It's not replacement theology. That's where Christianity has made a mistake. It's not replacement theology. It's continual theology. It's continual revelation. And then the Muslims came along with the Quran and added to the vastness of human knowledge. And we have all the Eastern religions and the Native American tribes. Everyone gets continuing revelation because we grow and we need new understanding, and we discover more and more the mysteries of the universe. And so as we grow, God gives us more and more. Call it a revelation, call it a download, call it whatever kind of languaging you want, but it is not just from us. Even if it were just from us, then from where did we get the minds that unfold and give over this information? That's from God as well.
Yeah, that could come from this ununderstandable, unanswerable question that I'm talking to you about. The idea that when those that have crossed over before us, and us, we will do it the same. That what the nature of all this is just so much huger than we could have even can't even. And those things like downloads and the throughout the centuries, they're obviously going through a human being, and those human beings have restrictions, and maybe those, what they think they were receiving was just a grain of sand on the infinite beach of what was trying to come through them at the time. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely, but one more grain of sand on the infinite beach is one more grain of sand. That to the old story, which I'm sure everybody in the spiritual world knows, about all the starfish that had washed up onto the beach, and there was this little boy who was picking up the starfish one at a time and throwing them back into the ocean. And somebody came to him and said, "What are you bothering for? There are hundreds, there are thousands, there are maybe 10,000 starfish here. You can't throw them all back, and it doesn't mean anything." And the little boy picked up one starfish and it said, "It means something to this starfish."
Yeah, okay. And thanks for sharing that. And this whole word of God, not that this matters too much right now in any conversation, but it's just worth putting out that, the human word that of this thing that we call God, all that is, I just, wonder, I've always wondered, what was there before God? And if something's always been, will always be, and always has been, then it's beyond my understanding to have any comprehension of how that began, or how that has always been. And I just wonder if we've put God in a box sometimes, that what if there were gods beyond gods, and what if there were something that we call God. It's just a word for something that we will never know quite what it is until we've crossed over. And even then, what if when we cross over, you're only able to perceive at the level that you're at, because you're not able to expand too much beyond that because you're not ready for it. Who knows?
So what difference does it make what word we've chosen if you think we've chosen a word? God is God. That's an English word. Hebrew has a different word for God. Greek has a different word for God. Latin has a different word for God. Hindi has a different word for God. Doesn't matter. Call God Fred or Sheila. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the entity that is the creator and the guider of the universe.
At the level at which we understand now, that's what we
At the
call
level with which we understand. That's correct.
Well, is it correct for me, or is it wouldn't be correct for you to talk that way, would it?
Well, sure. I mean, as I was trying to say earlier, science unfolds, revelation unfolds. It would be pure folly and pure foolishness to think that what we know and can articulate today is the be all and the end all. It's just what we know today. Come back tomorrow and we know something else.
Well, maybe tomorrow for some of us it might just be, as you say, what this whole book is about. What some of the premise of this book is being, being kind, being loving, seeing us all as equal. Okay, so we see each other as equal then. Just see the change just from one person. Let's not even try to expand it too much. If one person was to listen to this message and they saw that they were able to, come from that space. Obviously, we still live in a world of control and rules and a system, which probably is needed to some level. Is it just that basic? Is it that we're at that real basic stage that if we're just that more kinder to each other and ourselves, it would just improve life so much?
Let me give you an example, which I put in the book. So when my kids were little, and they're in their mid 40s and 50s now, when my kids were little, we tried to put into effect the teaching of an ancient sage. It was taught about him that if he needed a bunch of vegetables, when he went to the market, he bought 2. If he needed a piece of meat, when he went to the market, he would buy 2, one for himself and one for the hungry in his neighborhood. So when the kids were little, we made up this idea. Every time we went to this store, we would buy 1 extra item of non-perishable food. A box of cereal, a box of mac and cheese, a jar of peanut butter, a can of tuna fish. And we wouldn't even take it into the house. We just put it into the grocery sack that we kept in the trunk. What did it cost? Not much, another $1 a week or something like that. So one day I'm in the store with my younger son, who was probably about 5 or 6 at the time, and I took a box of Cheerios off the shelf. And I said to him, honey, how about this as our food gift this week? And this little kid, precocious as he was then, said no, and grabbed the cereal out of my hand and put it back on the shelf. And he reached up on his little tippy toes and he took a different box of cereal off the shelf. And he said to me, this will be our food gift this week. And I said to him, what's the difference? And he said, look, Dad, there are hungry kids out there too. And kids like sugar Frosted Flakes better than we like Cheerios. Now, in an instant, that child taught me to see not a category of people, the hungry, the poor, the needy, but he taught me to see the face of a child, the face of God, a child whom we were helping to feed, who likes one kind of cereal better than another. And so we can do that with everything. When we go to our closets and we give away old clothes, we usually give away a pair of pants or a blouse or a skirt or a shirt, something that's out of fashion or it doesn't fit anymore. And if a man needs a pair of pants, he probably also needs a pair of socks. But no one thinks to give away a pair of socks. So you give away a pair of socks. And if you don't want to give away your dirty old socks, on your way to the homeless shelter, stop at a local store and pick up a couple pair of socks. When we make Thanksgiving dinners, Thanksgiving baskets for the people in our neighborhoods who don't have the means to buy Thanksgiving food, we usually put in a turkey and yams and stuffing and cranberries. But how about putting in a box, a bottle of sparkling apple cider, or a bag of colorful jelly beans, or a nicely decorated cake? Just because people don't have money doesn't mean they wouldn't like to have a festive meal for an occasion as well. So I've come up with this principle called FANAMI, find a need and meet it. What does it mean? Well, I'll tell you. Back in 1996, I know that's a long time ago, but back in 1996, our house burned down in a Southern California wildfire, and we lost everything. We had no place to live, and we lost everything that we owned, from the most expensive and rare down to the last paperclip. And so a man came to me, one of the sweetest, kindest, gentlest, and wealthiest men I knew, who said to me, Rabbi, I feel so terrible for you. What's mine is yours. Ask me for anything and it's yours. So how was I to respond? What was I going to say? Take me out to dinner, buy me a suit, build me a house? I didn't know what to say. And when people do that, most of the time, people never respond. So, for example, if God forbid there's a death, don't go to the mourner and say, anything you need, I'm here for you. Just give me a call, because the mourner won't. But you can go and say, I understand your Uncle Charlie is coming in for the funeral. Let me know his plane arrangements. I'll go to the airport and pick him up. Or is your good suit still at the cleaners? I'll pick it up for you. Or don't worry about the kids tonight. I'll take them out for pizza and a movie. That's a concrete need, finding a need and meeting it in a concrete way. That's how we behave as human beings, caring about each other and doing for each other. Every religion, every faith community has some form of the so-called golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Well, what does it mean? It means if you, my friend, are depressed or unhappy, and I want to treat you the way I would like to be treated, I say to myself, well, maybe what I ought to do is get him tickets to the baseball game, and we'll go to the ball game together. And I'll buy him a beer and a hot dog. Well, that's great. That's what I might like if I were feeling bad. But what you might like is tickets to the symphony or to the theater. So if I'm going to treat you the way I would like to be treated, it needs to be in response to your needs, not the way I perceive your needs, but the way I truly understand your needs. That's how we make the life of another as precious to us as our own. All those examples and many, many more.
Yeah. No, they're great examples. Thank you for sharing them. And it's just the little things sometimes, isn't it, that makes such a big difference.
Well, I'll tell you, I was in New York one day, and it was a cold, misty, rainy day. And there I was all dressed up for my meeting, and I had a fancy leather briefcase. And I'm walking in the street, and I see this woman sitting on a blanket with her little baby, and she's wrote on a cardboard sign, I'm a starving artist. My baby and I are hungry. Please stop and help. Now, when I'm in New York, and more now these days when I'm anywhere, I keep in my pants pocket dollar bills, and I just give out dollar bills. And I know there's all kinds of discussion about maybe they'll use it for drugs, and maybe they'll use it to get drunk, maybe they'll use it to buy cigarettes. I don't care. If somebody needs something that's going to get them through the night, I'm more than willing to contribute and to give. But so I reached in, I had one of those trench coats, one of those raincoats that has a slit in the pocket so I could get into my pants pocket. And I reached in, and there were no more dollar bills. So I thought to myself, I thought, and I make this, I'm telling you this, it's going to take 30 seconds to tell you, but you do make this decision in a split second like that. If I want to give this woman any money, I'm going to have to stop, hold my hat, take off my gloves, set my nice leather briefcase on the ground, unbutton my raincoat, unbutton my sport coat, reach into my wallet, take out money, give her the money, and then reverse the whole process. And in the split second that my mind went through making that decision, I passed her by. I want to tell you that woman's face haunts me to this day, and that's probably 25 or 30 years ago. I went back to that same place the next day and the next day. As long as I was in New York trying to find her to give her money, I couldn't find her. And that woman's face haunts me to this day because I did not meet my obligation to a fellow human being who is in need. This bumper sticker about random acts of kindness and paying for the guy's coffee in the Starbucks line in front of you, that's really sweet and very, very nice. But we don't believe in random acts of kindness. We believe in required, obligated, responsible acts of kindness, because one human being is responsible for each and every other human being. And so our acts of kindness are required, are obligated, and that's how one human being takes care of another.
Mm. And I guess it's just, it's just enough sometimes, isn't it, just to get the message to a few people. Because we can't change everyone, can we? Because some people would listen to this that would still carry on and not, want to be any different. Do you know what I mean? It's a long-term thing, isn't it?
The prophet came to town and shouted and shouted and shouted, and originally they listened to him, and at the end, no one was there, and they said to him, "No one's coming to listen to you. Why do you keep shouting out your prophecy?" He said, "At least I listen to myself." So the answer to your question is, however many listeners listen to your program, and I assume there are tens of thousands, if not millions, because you have such a good program. If we change the behavior or suggest to one person, that's more than heard me an hour ago. And if it's 2 people, and if it's 20 people, and if it's 2,000 people, that's more than heard me an hour ago. And if just a few of those people take up some of these ideas and care about other people and give to other people and take care of other people, look, the bottom line is that we have 2 choices in life. We can either be selfish and care about only our own self-interest, or we can be committed to the common good, to the highest good, to the greatest good. So America used to be what I call a front porch community. We all sat on our front porches and talked to each other and listened to the baseball games on our little transistor radios. And all kinds of things change. We don't have to go into why it all changed. But America now, instead of the melting pot, e pluribus unum, out of many, we want to become one. We have become a frayed quilt of special interests. So I wrote this book as aspirational. I hope that people would listen and understand the response to community. And then we were hit with reality. COVID came along, and we had people saying the following. Here are the contrasts. I must go back to work because my pizza shop, my dry cleaners, my nail salon is the only way that I can support my family and pay my rent and put food on the table, and my children can't starve. That's one response. Or America must reopen because I must be allowed to go to a bar and drink and dance and go to the beach to get a suntan. We saw it over and over and over again in every situation in life. Schools opening, business opening. So the question is, and now it is, I will be vaccinated in order to protect my own life and remove as much risk from others as possible, or you can't tell me what to do. I have individual freedoms and individual rights, and if I don't want to get vaccinated, I won't get vaccinated. These are the same people, by the way, who stop at red lights and who don't shout fire in an open theater, in a crowded theater, because there are certain norms of society where we protect the entire society and our individual rights have to take second place. That's what's going on in America this moment. And it's not now just my life against your life. It's life itself. Will we put people who are not vaccinated into crowded rooms, like throwing a bomb into that room? We see the statistics, they're right there. 99% of the people who are getting COVID now are the people who are unvaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course.
What's the highest good? What's the common good? And sometimes the highest good and the common good outweigh individual rights and freedoms.
to them it's an anti-vax issue. Do you know what I mean? And based on their research, it's not what we think it is. This vaccine, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what's going on in their minds, maybe.
Well, whatever is going on in their minds, with all due respect, is flawed, because the science tells us the truth.
And it's like, how do we live in a world like that where we're going to respect their rights for not wanting to get vaccinated, but obviously they're going to, push it back as much as possible, but they're harming others around them, should they catch it, maybe, and become, whatever super spreaders or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That's we are seeing that, and it's that is not an easy one to answer. Do you know what I mean? Because it becomes political as well, don't it? In some respects, but it's the same issues as what's been going on, for centuries in different ways, right?
Yes, I mean it was the debate when America was founded: states' rights versus federal rights. Absolutely. But this is life and death here.
How do we get past that thinking? What causes such a shift that we do come into more alignment of what you're trying to promote here?
In terms of the vaccine, truly I don't know, except shouting from the rooftops. There are people who are far more learned than I. There are people who are who have a far larger bully pulpit than I, and we just have to continue. The sad thing is, and I say this truly with a broken heart, that the anti-vaxxers won't change their minds until they or their own children have died from COVID. And that is heartbreaking, and it shouldn't happen.
I'm trying to get in my head, like, okay. So we're trying to. I like what you're promoting. You're trying to promote, this idea that if we just come from this space of like being, radically loving to each other, like as the book title, things would change. But some people may say, well, okay, put God to one side. I don't believe in God. Let's just look at the radical loving from the perspective of just being kind to each other, right? Okay. How is that going to change my issues that I've got? Do you know what I mean? How is that going to change all the problems I've got in my life? I've still got to cope with them. I can't be radically loving all the time.
Well, you can be. It's a choice. So if we respond to anger or fear or hate or bewilderment in our own lives, if we respond with love instead of responding with anger and fear and hate and continuing bewilderment, then we heal ourselves, and then that's a step toward healing the world.
I completely agree with that, but some of us may be in the heat of whatever's going on, they're not thinking of the words that you're saying right now. These words would only come into their brain maybe as a reflection on the behavior of what happened in a situation, and then they may not even employ it in the next situation, but maybe one situation further down the line it might be used, right? Yeah, you know what I mean. We don't always, like, okay, if I'm in a heat of an argument with you, for whatever reason, which isn't going to happen, but if it did, I'm maybe not going to remember or come from this space. And why is the question? Why? Why do I choose not to? Why is some part of me choosing not to? Is it because I'm so used to coming from the opposite?
Well, it's again, I use the word you here, not to you personally, but you generically. It's you not loving yourself enough. It's you thinking the outside world controls your life instead of your inside world controlling your life.
In the midst of some major things going down, like, whatever, there might be something. I'm losing my house. It's being repossessed. Whatever. I'm in major debt. I can't afford it. I don't know. There's none of the. What's a good example? Well, whatever may be an example of someone's, has attacked me, or someone has done something to me that's really been very hurtful. It's difficult to come in that space, isn't it? In that moment.
It is very difficult. And again, we can let outside forces, whatever those outside forces are, we can let them control our lives, or we can go deep inside and we can determine the power, the character, the quality of our own lives. Now, I saw you moving, I heard you moving me away from God Talk before, which is perfectly okay. But I would return to God Talk to say, hello, God. Sometimes I can't get out of bed. Sometimes I can't get out of the chair. Sometimes I can't get up off the floor. I can't do this alone. And so, God, I'm asking you to come help me, to be my companion, to be my strength, to be my understanding, to be my courage. And God always says yes. This is the month in the Hebrew calendar, right? It's the last month of the Hebrew calendar year. We're coming up to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, next week. And during this month, we always read the 27th Psalm. Trust in God. God is my light and my salvation. Even if war were waged against me, even if my father and mother forsook me, I would still turn to you, God, because with you, I can face and overcome anything. So I see this from a religious point of view, or a faith point of view, but it can be seen from a secular point of view as well, from a non-God based, and that is, I have the great strength within me to say that all that is flung at me from the outside world cannot overcome the strength within me. We have a very, very dear friend who's in her late 90s now. You may even have known about her. Her name is Dr. Edith Eger, who wrote a book called The Choice. She was 15 years old when she was taken to Auschwitz. And on the very day, she had been a very fine little ballet dancer in her youth. On the very day she knew that her mother was taken to the gas chamber, she was ordered to be the after dinner entertainment for the commandant of Auschwitz and his buddies. And she said, we've always said to her, how did you possibly do it? And she said, nothing on the outside could change what's on my inside. And so thank God she was liberated from Auschwitz. She went to Texas, and she, who had never been to a day of high school, talked her way into the university, one of the University of Texas campuses, El Paso, I think. Got a college degree, went on, got a doctorate in psychology. She now is hired by not only the US military, but the German military to come to talk to the soldiers. If I can overcome Auschwitz, you can overcome anything, because it's not the exterior, it is the interior. As I say, she's in her 90s or so. I like promoting my own book, Radical Loving, One God, One World, One People, but I also love promoting her book. It's called The Choice. And I said to her, how did you do it? How did you do it? And she said, I had two choices. I could either become a victim or I could become a triumphant survivor. And at age 15, in the horrors of Auschwitz, I decided to become a triumphant survivor, and that's how I've lived my life.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. And you still know her, yeah? You're still in communication?
Yes, we know her very well.
Wow, I would.
Actually, I believe that there's a blurb from her in this book, in my book. Yes, we still know her, and before COVID, even in her 90s, we have lunch with her every couple of months.
I would love for you to connect us. I've always dreamed of speaking to someone from Auschwitz, and having that conversation with someone.
I'll
I
be glad to connect you.
I would.
And she has a second book now called The Gift.
Oh
She's
my God.
really a tremendous human being.
I've been. I mean, I've obviously been to Germany a couple of times, but never gone to that part. You know, never gone to the camp or anything like that yet. But yeah, totally. Wow, what a story.
There's another great story, which I put into one of my earlier books, which I learned later was apocryphal. It wasn't true. But it's a great story, so I tell it anyway, and I sort of have permission to tell it. The story is told about um, the great violinist. I can't remember his name now. The one with polio. So this great violinist who had polio walks with two crutches. Now he has a little wheel thing. Was playing at Carnegie Hall, and just a few measures into the piece, a violin string broke, and the audience was in hushed silence, not knowing what he would do. Would he walk off stage with his braces? Would he have somebody bring him a new string? What was going to happen? What was going to happen here? And he tore off the broken string. Now his violin has 3 strings, and he nodded to the conductor to continue. And he played the entire Tchaikovsky concerto with 3 strings. And you and I know that's impossible, but that night he didn't know it was impossible. So afterwards, it's roaring ovation. And according to this story, he quieted the crowd down, and he said, sometimes, my friends, we have to make music with what we've got left. And that's the story for all of us. Life is not, as my late mother would always remind us, life is not a bowl of cherries. Life is hard. Life can be heartbreaking. Life can be incredibly challenging. And if we let the outside break us, we will be broken. But if we keep the strength from the inside, from our interior, from who we truly are, then ultimately we can face anything and prevail.
And that trueness of who we are, this eternal soul, this soul that's always been and always will be. Do you think it came down here on a mission?
Every person who comes here is on a soul mission. Absolutely. On a soul contract.
Could it be multiple contracts?
Each one is different. Each one is different for each person.
Yeah, sure. How do we tap in through your understanding into that soul contract, that purpose of what we're here for? Is that just through, if it's just so joyful, it's got to be right?
Yeah, and there are so many ways to tap into our soul's truth. You can do it with prayer, you can do it with meditation, you can do it with singing and chanting. By the way, this book has a album that goes with it, 21 chants, because we made up chants because that's how a great deal enters our psyches and our consciousness, through repeated music. You can do it through yoga or dance or hiking, or all kinds of ways that we are alone with ourselves and let ourselves speak to us.
Yes, that inner voice.
Right. And so when I say ourselves, I'm capitalizing the S, ourself.
When you've spoken to that inner voice and it's guided you on what you're supposed to be doing, what did that feel like? How did that happen for you? Was it over a lot of time, or was it just sort of, how did that occur?
Well, they taught us in rabbinical school 50 and more years ago that every rabbi and every priest and every minister has one sermon in his or her life. I fortunately have had 2. My first sermon was a social justice sermon. I am a child of the 60s. I spent a great deal of my life on anti-war picket lines and pro-civil rights picket lines and work. And so my first many years of teaching and preaching was about social justice. And somehow God began, I mean, I always believed in God, I always prayed to God, but God began introducing herself into my life more and more. And my life's second sermon became, I am here to help you create your own deep, personal, intimate, loving relationship with God. Not just the communal relationship that you get from the prayer book or the scriptures when you go to church or synagogue or mosque, but that deep, personal, loving, intimate relationship when you can talk to God, as I like to say, with pillow talk. With the same intimacy that I talk to my wife, I talk to God. And so that's been part of the writings, part of the teachings, part of the lecturing that I've done over the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that connection's always upon us, always with us. And we've only just got to, want to connect and want to, allow that to come through sometimes for that inner journey as well. Yeah, I kept it a bit secular at the beginning of this interview, only because just for people that may, not have that sort of, that deep, that sort of, connection with the word God. So it may, not put people off, but it may be, just something that, it's not easy for some people to hear that word.
Well, I understand that, and sometimes I'm urged by other people to use other nomenclature, but the reality is the Pope talks about God, and the late Billy Graham talked about God, and every priest, minister, and rabbi talks about God. I have no compunction about talking about God. You want to use a different word? You don't have a belief system? Maybe I can help you create a belief system or a faith community system. But I have absolutely no apologies about talking about God, because God is, and God is the presence, and God is the Holy Spirit. And if people choose not to understand that or to accept that, I have total respect for people who have a different pathway. I just think that this is the pathway that is leads us to the highest compassion and love and goodness and righteousness.
Are you starting to see, have you seen, radical love sort of, being shown from more people as you, been on your journey for all these years? Are you seeing some of the change in the world, or do you think, which direction are we going in right now, do you think?
If enlightened people, if light workers hadn't tipped the scale just a tiny bit over the 50% mark, the world would have crashed and burned already. But fortunately, the world of the spirit, the world of light, the world of enlightenment, the world of light workers, the world of people who follow the divine in whatever form they understand him or her, that group has just moved the world a tiny bit over the line of continuation or destruction. Now you'll say to me, yeah, how do you know? Well, I'll tell you. Back in I don't know if you were in the States in those days, but back in 1987, we had this thing called the Harmonic Convergence. A bunch of people stood around the world, held hands and sang songs, and we were going to change the world. And the world, of course, laughed at us. Songs, holding hands, how silly. But you know what? In the couple of years following then, the Soviet Union fell. All the satellite countries fell. The Berlin Wall came down. Blacks and whites started riding the bus together in Johannesburg. Protestants and Catholics stopped shooting each other in Northern Ireland. And once in a while, Jews and Arabs sat down at a peace table. Now, is that because a bunch of kids sat down and held hands and sang songs? Probably not. But what we did do was send the love vibration into the world. The love vibration, which comes from the heavens, comes to us and spirals around us. If we send the hate vibration or the fear vibration out to the world, that's what will come back and smack us. But when we send the love vibration out to the world, the love vibration comes back to us, and it may enter a heart here and it may enter a heart there. Who knows? But what we know is that we are moving in the right direction, painful though it may be, and strewn with shattered dreams. COVID got in the way, and yet COVID has taught us tremendous lessons. And you know what? We say, where's God in all of this? Well, if you see the greater picture, let's think about it. The internet, email, Facebook, FaceTime, Instagram, DoorDash, Grubhub are no more than 40 years old. It may be that God was giving us the tools with which to survive this isolation, which was going to come. We don't know for sure. We certainly don't know even at all. But what would this isolation have been if we had none of those devices of communication? What would you have been without your cell phone? What would my community have been without Zoom, where we couldn't gather for religious services, but at least we could have services on Zoom? So who knows if that was the prelude? And who knows if being smacked by the differences between the common good and the individual rights isn't a great lesson that we're going to have to take in and learn.
Absolutely. Now, I know we're almost, thank you for that. We're almost at the end. Well, we are at the end now of this interview as well. We're just at the hour mark. Rabbi Wayne, what would be an important message that you might like to leave the audience with?
Love God, love yourself, love each other, love radically, be awesomely holy, make a world of peace and harmony and tranquility. The time has come. There's a line in sacred scripture which says, sometimes a person's entire lifetime comes down to 1 hour. Our time is now. Everything that's been gone is gone. Everything that lies ahead of us will depend on the choices that we make right now. So friends, choose wisely and choose well.
That's a really powerful message, and thank you so much for sharing that message, and thank you for coming on as well. So appreciate that.
A great pleasure. Thank you for having me.